All right, family, this is just a video on where is the River Jordan in Africa and where is Eden. Also, where's the River of Egypt? Because this is how we define the land of Israel. And lastly, are the Khazars coming to the Congo? You're going to have to wait till the end when I answer that final question. But I want you to please go through all of this information with me because on the location of the land and more confirmation as to what that is and the final wrap up around whether or not the Khazars are coming to the Congo at the very end. Because I think we have a lot of teachers teaching on the location of true Israel, but there's not a single one who can tell us where the Jordan River is or actually tell us where Egypt is. So we're going to get into all of those questions and pose the logical arguments that will, I think, enable people to arrive at the truth and greater understanding. And of course, I'm going to clearly point out where the River Jordan is, and hopefully other people can get some clarity from that. First thing I want to talk about is that a lot of people claim to know where true Israel is on the continent of Africa, but none of them seem to want to be able to explain where the Jordan River is. So if you actually believe you know, you're going to have to explain where the Jordan River is. I'm the only one who seems to have done it. And so I'm going to go over it again as it adjusts all the time. I certainly don't know everything, but I do know that you have to define that in order to define anything about where Israel is. And so it is continuously called the Nile River. But we're going to talk about that. So when we talk in Genesis 2:10 about the River of Eden, it's actually the Jordan River, the Yarden, the Eden River. That's what Jordan means. It's the Eden River. So Genesis 2:10 says, and a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted. So there's a river that is in and of itself on its own, and then there are four rivers that go out of it. So it says, and from thence it was parted and became into four heads. The Pishon, the Gihon, the Hiddekel, and the Parat, or Euphrates. So I'm going to show you again where they are. But the question is, why is this so important? Well, obviously, because we have to find out what the Jordan River is, where it's located, versus what the Egyptian River is and where it's located. And why do we need to know that? We need to know that because the actual lands of Abraham are defined by the Euphrates and the River of Egypt. So those are the east and west borders of the total land of true Israel. And so let's get into it. So some are ignorant of America being Egypt and the seven streams of the Egyptian Sea being between America and Africa. It's a curious term, the streams of the Egyptian Sea. There's only really one place in the world that's known for having seven streams in it that is also a sea. So when we hear the word streams and we hear sea, we know that this is a place where there's freshwater streams, but there's also a saltwater sea. It's got to be something that is both and. Now, according to Deuteronomy 28 and 48, we are currently in Egypt, and everybody who is teaching as an Israelite is going to tell you that we are currently in Egypt in America. So why is a single teacher teaching that Egypt is in Africa when we know, according to Deuteronomy 28 and 68 and 28 and 48, this is what is said. Therefore thou shalt serve thy enemies, which Yahuwah shall send against thee, in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and in want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he hath destroyed thee. So we know that there's only one people in the world who were taken to America in ships with a yoke of iron on their neck. over multiple stages, okay? But in particular in the last 400 years. Deuteronomy 28:68 tells us, Yahweh will bring thee into Egypt again with ships by the way whereof I spake, and thou shalt see it, meaning the homeland, no more. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bond men and bond women, and no man shall buy you, or redeem you. So it's very clear that what has already happened, if you're a descendant of slaves like me, your descendants came here from Africa with the yoke of iron around their neck in slave ships, or with spiritual yoke on steamships in most recent history. And so this is how we know America is Egypt, and everyone will quote this 400-year captivity phrase and talk about how we're in Egypt. And yet and still, they'll talk about the Nile and Egypt being over there in Africa. So let's get a little more clarity on how to rightly define and discern and divide this reality rather than confusing people by conflating the two. Leaving your audience, as a teacher, leaving people in a state of confusion by calling this Egypt when you quote Genesis 15, and then running over to Africa and saying that Africa is Israel, but saying Egypt's over there. That is a contradiction. But what I'm going to do is resolve for you again, which I've done many times, this seeming contradiction, which can be very easily explained, which will then force anyone claiming to know where the land is to explain it also. Genesis 15:18, it says, Yahweh made a covenant with Abraham, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. This is the east and western border of the land of Abraham, which is Israel. There is no southern definition of a border, and there is no northern one. So that means all land north and all land south, all the way to the ocean, is the land of Abraham. And so we need to find out where the river of Egypt is, and lastly, where the river Euphrates is. But most importantly, we have to understand what is the great river of Egypt. When we look at descriptions here in Isaiah, what the scripture says is that the Egyptian river is the Egyptian Ethiopic Atlantic Sea. And they are also described as the rivers of Cush. So this is a sea that has rivers in it. Again, this is a sea with rivers. And this is the Egyptian Sea, or the Egyptian river, that defines the western border of the land of Abraham. Okay? This is the Egyptian sea or river that defines the western border of the land of Abraham. These are called the 7 Gulf Streams. 7 Gulf Streams implies a river. And these are also known as the trade winds and trade streams upon which all the trading ships would trade between east and west. So Isaiah 11:15 says, Yahweh will make desolate the sea of Egypt, and he shall lay his hand on the river with a strong wind, and he shall smite the 7 channels, so there we got 7 streams again, of the Egyptian sea. So there's 7 streams in the Egyptian sea. It's sweet water of 7 streams and salt water of a sea or ocean, so that men shall pass through it dry shod. Isaiah 11:16, and there shall be a passage for my people that is left in Egypt, and it shall be to Israel as the day when he came forth out of the land of Egypt. Why? Because you're coming forth out of the land of Egypt again. So Egypt is over in the west. It's not on the continent of Africa. And between the continent of Africa, which is the land of Abraham, and the land of your captivity is a sea with 7 rivers in it. Zephaniah 3 and 10 says, from the boundaries or from beyond the rivers of Cush will I receive my dispersed ones. The Egyptian rivers, or the rivers of Cush, are the Ethiopic Atlantic rivers. Same thing again here. Same thing again. You can see in this image of Atlantis, it has 7 rivers in the midst there. When we are discussing the text and the definitions of the land of Israel, it's important to remember the texts we're looking at are either based on the Septuagint, which was the Greek translations, the Masoretic, which is the 800 AD Khazarian translation, or we are looking at an Assyrian translation. These are all post-captivity translations, post-Babylonian captivity translations. So when they're putting certain words in, we're going to have to understand, we have to see it from the perspective of what they called those lands. And so if we see that this is the Septuagint translation, the Greek translation, we're going to have to see that this is what the Greeks called that land as we read the definition of the lands that Joshua separated to the 9 remaining tribes after they crossed the Jordan River. So after the 9 tribes crossed the Jordan River and continued to war against the other nations, they were now on the east side of the Jordan River. And Yahuwah goes ahead and defines these lands. Now, as we read the definition of these lands, we say, oh, this is a Greek translation. So this is going to be a Greek name of this land. Okay? Just like how they call it all by the names of the Canaanites today. It's really the land of Israel today in the present tense, but because we're being ruled by Canaanites, they're still calling it the land of Canaan. And so if we look at this through the spectacle of the Greeks, we're going to see that the Greeks are going to call it what they see it as being, not necessarily what it is. And I want you to understand that Egypt is actually a colony. Why do I say that? Well, because how can we be captive in Egypt right now, yet we're not in Africa, in that Egypt? How can it be both and? It's got to be either or. Either we're captive there right now or we're captive here right now. Either this is Egypt or that is Egypt. So let's read this scripture. So Joshua is now an old man stricken in years, and Yahuwah says to him that you're old and stricken in years, and there remaineth very much land to be possessed on, basically, this is on the east side of the Jordan River. So we've crossed over this Jordan River, we're on the east side of Africa, basically. And he says, all the borders of the Philistine and the Geshuri from Seir, which is before Egypt. I want you to think this is a Greek translation from Seir, which is before Egypt. This isn't, are we in Egypt right now? Yes, we are. So this has got to be a different Egypt, like colony perhaps, which the Greeks understand to be a colony. Why? Because the Egyptians were always helping Israel in war. And they had many colonies on the continent of Africa. So this was their colony. Didn't Solomon have an Egyptian wife that he built palaces for? Yes. So this is a colony. From Seir, which is before Egypt, even unto the borders of Ekron northward. So he goes into all of these descriptions of the land, and they divided this land for an inheritance unto the 9 tribes and the half tribe of Manasseh. So Egypt here is known as the land of the Copts, a country at the northeastern section of Palestine through which the Nile flows. Well, it's actually the Greeks who renamed the Jordan the Nile. The Greeks renamed the Jordan the Nile. Josephus called the Jordan the Yarden. And the Greeks changed the Yarden to Nile. And they called Little Egypt, Egypt. They called an Egyptian colony in Africa, Egypt. And so this is where the confusion comes in, so that everyone would be tricked into thinking that Egypt was over there and not over here. But we all know that we're captive in Egypt. So what are some other ways we can prove that the seven streams are the Egyptian Sea, the Atlantic, Ethiopic, Egyptian Sea, that they are located there between Africa and North America? Well, when we go to Jubilees, Shem's land is allotted to him, and what is described from the top of the earth and the three tongues at the indrawing sea at the top of the earth, it is said Shem and his portion extends along the great sea, and it extends in a straight line till it reaches west of the tongue, one of these four tongues you see in the middle. So you know the Egyptian Sea, the Great Sea, is going to be in the west, okay? And it looks towards the south, for this sea is named the tongue of what? The Egyptian Sea. So this is how we know the Atlantic Ocean is the Egyptian Sea. That is also a river. Why is it both? Because of Pangea. It was originally 7 streams, but according to second ESDRAS, the salt water would mix with the sweet because of Pangea, and it would be both. And this is what has created the confusion. So once again, our witness in Jubilees 8 and 14 calls the Atlantic Ethiopic Ocean the Egyptian Sea. And we saw in the other scriptures that we looked at, Isaiah, I think it was Joel, that this is the rivers of Ethiopia, and this is the 7 streams. So it is streams and a sea, the Egyptian streams / sea. You see they are used, it's used interchangeably as sea and ocean at the same time because it is both and. All right, let's read this sentence, adding to the clues that the land of Abraham and Israel is west of the Egyptian Nile Sea. All right? Jubilees 10 and 29, and Canaan saw the land of Lebanon to the river of Egypt. So he's looking at land that approaches the river of Egypt, that it was very good. And he went not into the land of his inheritance to the west. So he's looking over at some land in the east that approaches the Egyptian Sea, moves towards the Egyptian Sea. He's standing in the west, and he doesn't turn back and go west into his own land. It says, and he dwelt in the land of Lebanon, eastward and westward from the border of the Jordan, and away from the border of the sea. So in other words, he went inland from the Egyptian Ethiopic river sea to dwell on either side of the Jordan. Once again, he stood in the west, he looked to the east at Lebanon, and then he went from the border of the ocean into Central Africa to dwell on either side of the Jordan. Make sense? Put a 1 in the chat if it does, or put a 1 up and say you agree with it as a comment on the leaderboard. What we see, as I said before, is there's no southern and there's no northern border. So this is going to cover absolutely everything all the way to the tongues at the center of the earth. The tongues of the indrawing sea and the Rubus Negro at the center of the earth. And this is going to extend all the way to the south of Africa. This is how large the land of Abraham is in the land of Israel. And how do we know that? Well, let's look at some of these borders. Let's look at some of these descriptions. I'll try not to get too detailed. But when we look at Joshua, what it says is the lot of the tribe of Judah by families, even to the border of Edom, the wilderness of Zin, southward, was the uttermost part of the south coast. So it goes all the way to Edom, and then it goes all the way to the south. Joshua 15:2 says that their border was from the shore of the salt sea, from the bay that looketh southward. So I've talked to you before about the two salt seas that are kind of on the east coast of Africa. And then it says, Lake Natron, and then there's another one. But it's all the way to the south. But it's saying border. And now here's another one in Joshua 15:7. The border went up towards Debir. Debir is in South Africa. Okay? And Joshua 15:4 says that thence it passed towards Asmon and went unto the river of Egypt, and the goings out of the coast were at the sea. This shall be your south coast. So when it talks about the river of Egypt, remember, we're talking about the Atlantic again. This is confirming once again the river of Egypt is the Atlantic Ocean. All right? And then all the way down to the south. So that's the entire continent of the head of Africa. And it says in Joshua 15:5, the bay of the sea at the uttermost part of the Jordan. So the Jordan River becomes these four rivers. But it could also be described to go to all the way to the end of Africa. It's a central river. So Joshua 18:19, it says that the border passed along Beg Halah northward, and the outgoings of the border were at the north bay of the sea and the south end of Jordan, and this was the south coast. So the south end of the Jordan River is the south coast. A coast always implies ocean. So the coast, south coast of Africa, is the southernmost border of the land of Israel. That's a big land. In Joshua 18:5, they shall divide it into 7 parts. Judah shall abide in the coast of the south, and the house of Joseph shall abide in their coasts on the north. So that's all the way into Western Europe, all the way to those tongues at the center of the indrawing Rubus Negro Sea. So as I said, and I'll say it again, Israel has no northern or southern border. The water, the ocean at the north and the ocean at the south are the northern and southern coasts of the land of Israel. The ocean at the north and the ocean at the south. And I've shown you guys over and over again. And of course, there's so many teachers who completely ignore this. If anyone's ignoring this, you shouldn't be listening to them. Matthew, the land of Zebulun, land of Naphtali, the way of the sea beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. So this land was occupied by Gentiles, and it was taken over again by Gentiles. But when they took it, the 10 tribes of Israel, the northern kingdom, Joseph, Ephraim, and Manasseh, it was near the land of the Gentiles. Matthew 11:22, it shall be more tolerable for Tyre and Sidon in the day of judgment than for you, it is said of Israel. Tyre and Sidon are in the northern kingdom. Then Yahushua went thence and departed unto the coasts of Tyre and Sidon. He came but for the last sheep of Israel. He was only looking for Israel. This is also the literal land of the 10 tribes of Israel where he is. And it is where the Gentiles currently occupy and took over the identity today. And from Jerusalem and from Idumea and from the beyond the Jordan, and they about Tyre and Sidon, a great multitude, they had heard what things he did, and they came unto him, says Matthew. Mark 3:8. And again, Tyre and Sidon mentioned in Mark 7 and 24. And this is Yahusha is there looking for the lost sheep of Israel, right? And it says in chapter 7, again, departing from the coast of Tyre and Sidon, he came to the Sea of Galilee through the midst of the coasts of Decapolis. So he is still in the land of Israel, seeking the Israelites. So Tyre and Sidon have been places taken by the Gentiles, but they are part of the land of Israel. And again, I've gone over this many times. France is Tyre. France has Switzerland, and Germany is also considered now part of Tyre. Tyre was originally where the Black Sea is. So that whole region is the Kingdom of Israel, Northern Kingdom, as I've clearly shown you. All right? And so France is Tyre, and the prince of Tyre was sent to the 10 tribes. Solomon sent to the 10 tribes to the widow's son to build the temple. Sent to the widow's son from Tyre and Sidon. And Sidon is Heth. It says, Zebulun shall dwell in the haven of the sea, and it shall be for a haven of ships, and his border shall be unto Sidon. So the Sidonians are Heth, and those are Canaanites. Those are the French right now. Okay? Genesis 49, I know thy works were there, dwellest even where Satan's seat is, and thou holdest fast my name, and thou hast not denied the faith, even those days wherein Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was slain among you where Satan dwells. And so the seat of Satan, the seat of Satan is in Tyre. And the seat of Satan today is in Germany. They actually moved the altar of Satan, or the seat of Satan, to Germany. Okay, and it's also known to be in Switzerland, where it talks about where Antiochus was martyred. I think I have Genesis here. I think I have the wrong scripture. I'll correct it, but you'll see it corrected. So this was known, Switzerland was known as the Black Land, where the Stuarts were. The Stuarts were, the Schwartz were. Okay, so Northern Europe, that is the northern kingdom of Israel. And the border of the Canaanites was from Sidon, as thou comest up to Gerar, unto Gaza, as thou goest unto Sodom and Gomorrah, and Admah, and Zeboim, and even Lasha. So this is in Genesis. So we know that Sidon and Tyre are way up north, and they come all the way down to Sodom and Gomorrah, which would be where Lake Natron or the Salt Seas were on the east side of Jordan, and that was where Lot was dwelling. So that's around Tanzania, Kenya, and Lake Natron, the eye of Africa, the Lake Victoria. Okay? So it's all the way from the Black Sea down to there that has just been described. It's all the way from around Germany and the Black Sea all the way down to Kenya. And of course, we know France has the largest shipping company. I think I have this scripture read out in about 10 videos. So if you don't know it now, you should know it. If nobody is teaching you this geography, I would not recommend you listen to them. If they don't know this and they're making guesses and they're repeating content that was on videos from people that people did 5 years ago, but they don't know this, don't listen to them. Get some ideas, but move on quickly because they haven't done their research. It's just lazy. That's how I see it. It's just laziness. And so here is the altar or seat of Satan in Germany that was moved there. And we see here again the whole thing. This is the northern part of the kingdom of Israel. I did tell you guys about a dream where I had where the plain of Jordan was called Farm Yah. And so a lot more of what we're going to read is going to confirm that. But what I want to show you here is that once again, East and west of the Jordan was the definer for the land. According to Genesis 13:11, then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan and journeyed to the east, and they separated themselves one from another. Abraham dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain and pitched his tent towards Sodom. Okay, so there again, east of the Jordan and west of the Jordan is how even Lot and Abraham divided the land. All right, and so I've said before, and I just went over it again, according to Joshua, once again, that Judah shall abide in their coasts on the south, and the house of Joseph shall abide in their coasts on the east. So these are the east, west, north, and south divisions of the continent, which then can lead you to understand that if there's 4 rivers coming off of the land of Eden, the land of the east and the south, right, in Eden, and Israel divided the land into these 4 quadrants, then this is indeed the land of Africa, and the land of Africa is Eden, okay? And you have got to define, you will not know where the true land is until you can define where the Jordan River is, all right? And so once you can do that, you're gonna get a little closer. We'll all get a little closer. The Jordan River runs north to south, and the lands of Israel are divided towards the east and the west of the River Jordan. That's how they're defined. And so here's a quick review in 1 Chronicles. It says at the end of this paragraph, verse 12 and 15, that these are they that went over the Jordan in the first month when it had overflown all his bank, and they put to fight all of them in the valleys, both towards the east and toward the west. So they're defining their land as east or west of the Jordan. When we look at the Greek letter of Orestes describing the land of Israel, what it says is this, that the size of the city of Jerusalem has moderate dimensions, and it has towers arranged in the shape of a theater with thoroughfares between them, and now the crossroads of the lower towers are visible, but those of the upper 106 towers are more frequented. So he goes into all of these descriptions about steps and people going up and down them and these crossroads. But he moves down to here to the red text, and it says, the country produces everything in abundance, since it is well watered in all directions and well protected from storms. The river Jordan, as it is called, never runs dry and flows through the land. So agreeing with scripture, it centrally divides the land. Okay, it centrally divides the land. And so here we have some images, more ancient maps. These maps are available to download and look at the names on, if you become a member on intoltruth.net. Now again, about the Jordan. The river, like the Nile, let me repeat that, like the Nile, rises in harvest time and irrigates a large portion of the land. Near the district belonging to the people of Ptolemies, it issues into another river, and this flows out to the sea. Other mountain torrents, as they are called, flow down into the plain and encompass parts of Gaza and the district of Ashdod. This is the interesting part. The country is encircled by a natural fence. It is very difficult to attack and cannot be assailed by large forces, owing to narrow passes with their overhanging precipices and deep ravines, and the rugged character of the mountainous regions which surround all the land. And we are told that from neighboring mountains of Arabia, copper and iron were formerly obtained. So Arabia actually would probably more likely be what we know as West Africa. That's where Mount Seir is, and that's Mount Seir, and that's Edom's land. But let's look here at what the land looks like again. And so here you can see at the very center of what we would call the Congo here, as I've named many times as probably true Israel, you see that it is a well-watered land in Central Africa that is also surrounded by very many mountains and plains. And so let's get into more about how the land yields. Continuing Orestes' description of the land. Originally, the country contained not less than 60 million acres, though afterwards the neighboring peoples made incursions against it, and 600,000 men were settled upon it in farms of 100 acres each. So that's 60 million acres. According to afbdnews.org, with its 80 million hectares of cultivable land, its 4 million hectares of irrigatable land, and its varied climate, allowing year-round agriculture, it's having 7 to 8% of the world's exploitable fresh water, and it's approximately 125 million hectares of grazing land, sufficient for 40 million head of livestock, coupled with the size of its population, especially young females. Why is that interesting to them? DR Congo incontestably has the means to be the breadbasket of Africa, the epicenter of the continent's agricultural industry, and an incubator of prosperity. So we already went over the description of the Eden rivers. You can just quickly read them here, pause to read if you like, but let's review again where I think they are. And again, this is always evolving. We're never absolutely sure until we're in the kingdom, but I believe the Congo River, or the Gihon/Niger River, is the true fourth river. It's been spread out and redug and moved and all kinds of things, but it would essentially go out along the Niger here and connect with the Amazon if Pangea were reversed. And so, but clearly in the center we see, as I've already said, the Jordan River runs all the way from the top of Africa to the bottom, and the four rivers separate from there.
In an unexpected turn of events, Israel's government, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, is rumored to be in secret talks about a voluntary migration scheme. The plan? To relocate Gazans to Congo at the conclusion of the ongoing conflict with Hamas. Congo has high levels of inequality, and 52.5% of the population lives below the poverty line. Mr. Netanyahu told a Likud faction meeting last week that he was working towards facilitating the voluntary migration of Gazans. Our problem is finding countries that are willing to absorb Gazans, and we're working on it.
Family, tell me if you think this is a very odd strategy. Is it really the Gazans they're going to relocate to the Congo, given that we are fully aware that they tried to set up the original first Israel in Uganda? Or is it themselves they want to relocate? And as I told you in not my last Dreams and Visions video, but the previous one, I told you that I had a dream that I landed in Farm Yah in the Congo, which Yah said, this is Farm Yah, this is Yah's farm, basically. And I had all of this wealth with me, but it was underneath these parachutes, and the parachutes had nets underneath them. And the nets had like all these packages, but they looked like balls, and they were swirly and black and white. But I was told that was wealth and treasure, but yet they were balls and they were black and white. And what I think this might be is the Israeli strategy for their own relocation that they're negotiating, because it is very clear. And please watch my prophecy video on the end of the Khazars and the rise of Yasharel, Aliyah. Okay, that was a prophecy I gave before Celestial gave the same prophecy. She gave him a week after, or actually I think about more than a week after. But I believe I kept wondering what those things were, and they're bales. So my suspicion is, and I'm not entirely sure, but as it says in 2 Kings, just like when the Assyrians came to rob Israel, And Yahuwah, they dared to speak against Yahuwah, proud words. He turned the whole Syrian army away, and Israel had been starving, and they plundered the Assyrians that way. All these lepers got all of this food, and the whole of Israel fed off the treasure of the plunderers. Those who were coming to plunder them wound up getting plundered. And I have the very suspicious feeling that this is what will happen if the Khazars try to do this and relocate themselves to the Congo, and that this is really a smokescreen for that happening, that when they land, that is when they will bow before Israel and they will be plundered. And it's going to turn on their head. A couple of the prophecies I said about the Khazars have already come true, and there's one more I'm going to kind of put up. But really the emphasis, so that's just for your, please go ahead and look at the video again. I'll put it at the end here. But I want to know what you think about this family. Is this really a setup for them to return? And is Yah setting them up to be plundered based on the judgment that he sent forth through my mouth? Praise Yah. As he humbles me daily. You guys have no idea. But he blesses me too. It's like I just feel like it's fire and ice. Yeah, give me your thoughts, family. May Yah bless you and keep you and cause his face to shine on you. May he be gracious, lift the light of his countenance, and give you peace. Sorry, I haven't posted for a while, but I got that terrible C. So bless you all. And shalom. Please go ahead and pick up materials or join and become a member on my site. Your support is really appreciated. And it's a recurring membership for a year. And you have to set up a profile. And I'm also going to do the prayer team, but there will be no praying in tongues. And you're going to have to strictly review all the videos on the topic. All right? Shalom and Baruch.
Love, worship, and praise Yahweh. Give him thanks by saying hallelujah.